I'm very happy. Perfect. It's being recorded. That's great. Thank you, Sean. So my name is Eric Stromberg. I am the director of the Center for Port Management at Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas. And I welcome you all to the COPRI Asset Management Subcommittee meeting on July 28th. We are attending this meeting virtually from far-flung places, including Melbourne, Australia. I think, I guess my background, I don't know that we need to get into too much detail on that, but I'm a port industry guy, and I'm really happy to see ASCE, COPRI, and their Asset Management Committee providing us, I think, a very good venue for the discussion of asset management. I have invited the AAPA Facilities Engineering Committee, and I don't know if we have anybody. I'm sure we have at least some associate members here that are on the AAPA committee, and perhaps even some owners. But I think that coordination will be important, as it is with IT, and Daniel Elroy is coordinating that, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Private terminal operating companies are also engaged in asset management in perhaps a little bit more limited and focused way than port authorities, with not such a breadth of asset portfolio, but their experiences will be helpful, and I think what the committee can offer them will be helpful. State departments of transportation in the United States have asset management plans as part of their requirements as a condition of getting funding from the U.S. federal government. And while Patty Gaynor will talk to us in just a little bit, she's at the Maritime Administration, a modal administration within U.S. DOT, and has been in touch with her counterparts within DOT on the asset management initiatives that are going on. Let me ask a question. Do we have anybody who is not from the U.S. besides Mick? Particularly, I'm looking at some of our Canadian friends, Vancouver, Montreal.
Yes, this is Mahmoud Alfa from IDS in Canada.
I'm sorry, say your name again?
Mahmoud Halfawi from IDS.
Hey, Mahmoud. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, welcome. Perfect. I don't see any owners at this point. Very well. I don't see any owners, but that's okay. So this call is going to be tight. We have a lot packed into the agenda. I had to drop one thing, and I apologize for trying to put 20 pounds of stuff in a 10-pound bag. But I think we can get through it. It's important that we do a follow-up. This is just really the formal initiation of work that's been done for some period of time. And for that, I would like to thank Patricia Gaynor, who I mentioned from the Maritime Administration, Ryan Tarbett, who's the U.S. ISO rep, and works with Atkins, Daniel Elroy from North-South GIS, and Todd Neely, Neely at Port Advisors, and also North-South GIS. We have been working together for the past month or two to plan the activities of the COPRI Asset Management Subcommittee. So we will probably do a follow-up survey, and we'll probably look at quarterly meetings. But again, this is going to depend on our agenda and what you all's preferences are. And I would invite you all to invite your colleagues to join us. The more the merrier. So with that, I would like to ask my old friend Mick Lobianco. I say old, he's not old, I am. But well, at least one of us is. We've been, I've known Mick for nearly 20 years now. And really the Port of Melbourne, under Mick's leadership on the asset management side, has been a global best practice. And I think I know we're privileged to have him take an interest in what we're doing here and share his knowledge and experience. So with that, I will turn it over to Mick.
Thank you, Eric. Welcome all. I've got a slideshow which I'll share. I haven't done this.
Mick, you became muted.
Ah, okay. I'm just trying to, there we go. Okay, can you see the slideshow?
Yes, all good.
Yeah. Okay, the full picture, the full screen, yeah?
Yep, all good.
Okay, all right. So again, thanks very much for the introduction, Eric. I'll just get straight into it. I've only got about 8 slides. This is just a brief outline of what I'll be talking about. A little bit about why strategic asset management, basically the Port of Melbourne. I want to go into the maturity model that I developed at the start of the program, talk a little bit about the optimised renewals system and a little bit about technology, levels of service, and certification to 55001, which is the last thing, one of the last things I did at the Port of Melbourne, and then an asset management plan structure, because it appears in the agenda a few times, so I thought it was worth mentioning some issues around that. And obviously some questions at the end. So I'll just go straight in. So I left the port about, well, basically at the start of this year, but a year or so before that, I established Converge Asset Management just as a small sole trader business. But it's really been active really since I left the port in about April of this year. So I've been in asset management about 40 years in those areas of strategy, technology, process and certification work. Done a lot of work in project management, recently with in sustainability and also data and information management. I'm a civil engineer, undergrad at Monash University, got postgrad qualifications as well. Certified asset management assessor with the World Partners in Asset Management. So with the Asset Management Council of Australia, I've been certified as a certified practitioner in asset management as well. I'm affiliated with the Engineers Australia, the Asset Management Council, institution, the IPWEA, Australasia that is, and more recently the American Society of Civil Engineers and COPRI. So why strategic asset management? Well, I think we all recognise that our asset portfolios are ageing, which obviously results in decreasing, worsening condition, which increases risk. So it's being able to manage, understand that, what that means, and actually being able to manage that is one of the key changes from tactical asset management. This is taking it to a different level, and also to understand the future renewal liabilities that you face, and taking a whole of life approach to planning new infrastructure, and making decisions around your renewals or maintenance or whatever it might be based on levels of service, which we're going to talk about later anyway, and risk, and then obviously having a robust sort of strategic plan in place. It gives you repeatability in decision making. I think that's really important as well, and rather than just doing it off the cuff as you go. So it's got to have a good structured approach so you can have repeatability and you can basically support the decisions that you make. And often we do it also, and I've been in the situation where there's balance sheet pressure on, so you've got less money, and what do you do with that money? You put it into the assets that are of greatest need or greatest return on investment to the business. So that is another outcome or an output of a strategic program. I developed this about 17 years ago. It's pretty basic, but it's been with me for a while. Some of you may have already seen it as well, but I think it's still relevant, and it's really identifying I guess the progression, the maturity, I call it just the maturity model, but basically from chaos up to strategic asset management. And I've put in there 3 other layers, say pre-asset management, basic and advanced asset management. I won't go into all of those dot points on the right there, but essentially it goes from no data, no structure, no accountability to renewals-based return on investment, asset condition-based risk, advanced risk and failure prediction, CapEx based on lowest life cycle costs, and corporate-wide asset management plans, those sorts of things. So, and there's obviously a graduation of capability between those 2 levels as well. Another output of a good strategic asset management system is this. When we went through the privatisation of the Port of Melbourne in about 4 years ago, we went through a due diligence process, and the government was warranting, I guess, certain things to bidders. And one of the things that we'd done previously was develop renewal profiles. And this is obviously simplified because it's commercial in confidence. There's no numbers in here, but it just gives a sense of the perpetual strategy being what a renewal profile would look like if assets were just renewed or replaced based on condition only. When they just got to the end of their life, they were just renewed or replaced, and that's kind of the renewal profile you see over about 50 years, 40 years. So what we were doing, Port of Melbourne was doing, we were taking a commercially optimised strategy approach, and we were using our optimised decision-making and risk-based methodologies to then maybe defer some of those decisions, those renewal decisions, and invest money in other areas. Because I've never worked in a place where you've got more money than you need to maintain your assets or renew your assets. It's always the other way around. So you've got to do more with less. So it's a matter of how you do that. So we were able to defer or change strategies on various classes of assets and push things further out and further out to extend the life of assets. And that's kind of what's shown in the graphic on the right-hand side. And you can see the difference by having the perpetual, no real asset plan or asset strategy in place versus implementing a commercial optimised strategy on the right. And through that tender process or the privatisation process, that came through because the due diligence consultants that the government had put on, they did a renewal strategy based on perpetual, and that there was a gap, there was a disjoin between the two. And then when they started looking in further detail, they realised that we were actually optimising our strategy. So the government got a very, very good price for the port. And I think this sort of stuff went a long way towards doing that, getting that sort of outcome, because able to demonstrate sound asset management practices. And very quickly, I won't spend too much time on this one. This is just a simple architecture diagram where we have what I call the core asset system here, where you've got your basic functions, all supported by the asset register. You're doing works, condition, and administration reporting, and then you overlay your strategic functions, risk, lifecycle planning, renewals modelling, and optimised renewal decision making on top. Interface with other internal systems and external works management, and through VPN or Citrix coming through here as well. Pretty basic, but this is really just to demonstrate that these advanced modules basically sit on top of your basic tactical asset management system, and they take information from all the other external systems. A little bit on levels of service. I think this is an area that I'm particularly interested in, because I find it's just a little bit it's subjective, and it's a little bit hard to grapple with sometimes, because having good sound levels, service level indicators, really give purpose and focus to your strategic asset management program, because you're able to identify what it is you're going to measure. And deciding on what those SLIs are and the targets that you're going to measure, and the targets that you set gives you something to measure too. They can be really quite overwhelming, and they can be very subjective, which is probably the challenging part, I think. But and ISO does this really well, because what ISO does, it actually forces businesses or organisations to take into account the needs and expectations of their customers and their stakeholders and any other interested parties. So when you start doing that, then you need to start defining. You set objectives, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a couple of slides' time, but you set objectives, and then you need to have in place your measures and targets, how you're going to measure that you're actually meeting those objectives, because all that then becomes auditable. So it's a very structured approach, and this is what I like about the ISO program, and this is what I like about this whole levels of service area, but what we did before, well and truly pre-ISO, at the port, I basically developed 3 categories of indicators: availability, port performance, and compliance. And they're the number of indicators we had for each of those, within each of those categories. And we were using a dashboard approach just to measure those internally and report those internally. This one here, for example, the critical availability of critical aids to navigation is one that there's a government requirement to report on that, and we'd set a target of 99.8% availability. And its performance measures operational time over the total time. And another one that we'd set internally is the performance of maintenance, basically unplanned maintenance, unplanned works over planned works plus unplanned works. In other words, how much of your total works spend is unplanned? Because the idea, I think, is to drive that down as much as possible and have as much of your maintenance and infrastructure spend as planned as possible, because it helps you manage risk and reliability and uptime, etc. So that was a target that we'd set, and they're the sort of things that we were playing with. But early days. But it gave us a bit of a focus, and I think when we went into the ISO program, it also gave us a bit of a leg up as well. So a little bit further on the ISO program then. So as part of the privatisation of the port, how am I going for time? Yep. As part of the privatisation of the port, the concession deed that the government released and the port operator signed up to included a requirement to certify the asset management standard of the business, the asset management system of the business, to ISO 55001. So the business decided that that's fine, but the business decided to integrate 3 other standards, and as you can see those down below, and take the Big Mac approach. So we had the asset management system, a quality management system, an environmental management system, and health and safety OH. That's the latest version, the 45001. So you got safety, environment, quality, and asset management, and we rolled them together into an integrated management system, and we branded it the Compass. And what it did for us essentially, it gave us the ability to, or the impetus to basically realign or re-establish operational processes with the business objectives. It resets all of that, because standards talk about having this line of sight between what you say you're going to do and what you do. And what you do happens at the operational level, but what you say you're going to do is at your corporate level. So, and you've got to demonstrate that line of sight. And as I spoke about before, gives you much better alignment in relation to the stakeholders' needs and expectations. You need to understand exactly what they are, and then you set objectives around that, and then you set up systems so that you can actually implement those, and you set the standards that you're going to. You don't have to do everything that they say, but whatever's right for your business, because the standards are enabling, and they allow you to set what's the right for your business, but essentially what you say you're going to do is what you need to do, and that's subject to audit. So I'm a big fan of ISO, and I think it's just really good for business, and it just adds structure and discipline, and it makes it everyone knows what's expected of them, and it really gives a lot of clarity, and it's a great way to work. But the other thing I found, and probably the biggest learning from all of this, is leadership. And there's a whole section on leadership in the standards, in all of those standards. In fact, you can't understate, the importance of having strong leadership to implement a system like this successfully. I did 4 standards implemented with 4 minor non-conformances at the end of it in 18 months. And that was a huge amount of work, because when we came out of a privatisation process, and there was some staff engagement surveys done straight after that, and 52% of the staff didn't really want to be there. So some major cultural issues there. And here's me trying to overlay a certified program that's going to change the way they do business. So it was really tough, but without strong leadership, it would have been difficult. And I'm talking about the senior leaders in the business, the CEO, the executive, and those sorts of people. And having said all of that, I think you can still do good quality sound asset management without being certified, but being certified just demonstrates to all external parties that you're actually doing that, because it does force you down a path where you need to make, and it's a maturity thing as well. When you first get your first certification, you get away with a few things that maybe aren't so fantastic and aren't so perfect, but then as you go for recertification further down the track, after 5 years, the expectation is that you improve your system, and there's a requirement there around continuous improvement. As you can see, the plan, do, check, act, you've got to do all of that internally, and you've got to fix it yourself. You find something, you've got to fix it and then implement it, and then you check it. So it does take you down a path of maturity. And I think the last one is the plan structure. Essentially, you have to have a strategic asset management plan that aligns your stakeholder needs and expectations with your business requirements and with your business asset management objectives. And that's renewed annually, but that's in line with your corporate plan. Down the bottom of that model there, we also set up asset class and engineering strategies. So we took this 3-tiered approach, slightly different to what a lot of other businesses do. And they've got an engineering focus. They talk about things like degradation and condition interventions, risk and optimized decision-making parameters. We developed 11 of those plans, and 8 supplements were also developed. And they're the technical strategies for managing the different classes of assets, very much engineering focus. They both, the SAMP and the class strategies, feed into what we set up as site asset management plans. Now, these site asset management plans, they have a commercial focus. We developed 24 of them. They're basically based on precincts, and they take into account all of the infrastructure that's in those precincts, and it takes into account all the stakeholder, the customer issues, the planning, the maintenance, the finance. It's the whole of business approach is based around those precincts. So that's the approach we took, and it kind of restructured the business a little bit in line with this, because it's a nuance to the way we used to do business, but it now gives focus. So whatever decisions are made around a particular facility or in a particular precinct, it has to take into account all of these other things like planning, maintenance, and all these other additional areas need to be taken into consideration. And then they may or may not feed back to the class engineering strategies, and also inform the SAMP going forward for changes, again with a continuous improvement in mind. But essentially that's the approach we took in terms of the plans, and that's pretty much all I had. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
You mentioned that you had 8 supplemental plans on your previous slide.
Yeah.
Can you what do you mean by supplemental? I mean, in the context of the asset management plans.
No, they were just supplements. we had the core plan, as I said, was around about the degradation, and it was basically the way the engineering plans or the engineering assets those being managed. But the supplements were just additional information around that were particular to that particular class of assets. It's a bit hard to answer that one without actually going through an example to show you what I mean.
No worries. Thank you.
So.
Hi, Mick. Ryan Tarbett here.
All right.
Hey, great presentation. I was wondering if you could give a little color on what your experience was like. You made a comment that I thought was really, really good, that the way the standard is put in place at your organization is reflective of the needs of your organization because it's a standard. So I was wondering if you could give a little color on when you went through the certification process, what that looked like to you, given that, you know, it was wrapped around your port, and how you were looked at and evaluated, and what it felt like. Yeah,
good question, Ryan. It was actually it was interesting. We had because we took the integrated approach, it challenged a couple of the auditors, because they're used to seeing like an objective, a measure, target, risks and opportunities related to that objective, very linear. We set 8 objectives for the integrated management system. They weren't all related to asset management. Most of it related to quality. It was kind of it was a bit of a matrix thing like that. Like some were related to commercial, which were some related to health and safety. So it wasn't a direct one-to-one relationship. So when the auditors were going through and looking for the linear, the objective, the measures and targets, etc., they didn't quite see that, and they actually quite challenged by that. But then that was just the approach we took, because the standards allow you to do that. As long as you stay within the spirit and scope of the standard and the intent of the standard, and you can demonstrate that that actually works for the business, it's not a template, because this is scalable. You can apply the 55,001 standard to a business with, you know, 5 staff who who lease cars, you know, just like a car rental company, or a large multinational company, with infrastructure all around the world. So it needs to be scalable. So it's about demonstrating that you've got the fundamentals in place, that you're setting objectives, you're breaking those down, you've taken into account the risks and opportunities, the stakeholders' needs and expectations. You've identified what they are, and you set some objectives to meet those requirements. And at a high level, they fit into your business, your corporate plan, and then operationally, you've got all the infrastructure to support them. So we developed 55 workflows, for example. We developed about 200. We didn't develop. We already had a lot of it in place, but we reviewed and rationalised about another 200 documents. We stripped out. It was a great exercise to strip out a lot of information that was in our document management system, which was legacy stuff, which wasn't even being looked at. So we cleaned all that out. So we had a core set of documents and procedures and processes and workflows, cleaned it all out. And this is how we sold it to the staff, by saying, well, actually, you know, it's not going to be a problem anymore, because they used to say, well, we don't get this information from that department in time, so we can't meet these requirements, and it happens all the time. So by putting in place some workflows that everyone signed up to across divisions, that weren't defined by divisional boundaries, it's a business process workflow that everyone has to sign up to, everyone commits to, it actually made things a lot easier, and it just improved the way people worked. This is why I'm such a fan of it, because if you take that leap of faith and go, and then don't hold back, and actually take it on as far as you can, it actually it really does work. So and people have signed up to it, and it's just the way the business works now. But that was probably the biggest the challenge, I think, was if you're just doing one standard, I think it would have been relatively straightforward. But when you incorporate another 3, it gets a little bit clouded in some areas. So, but we were able to, you could see it was there, but the auditor just needed to be, and also we had a consultant come through and just do a bit of a as a pre-audit sort of health check, if you like. And he said the same thing. He said, I just can't quite see how you, upstream of your objectives, I can see how you've linked it, but downstream, I can't quite see that. I said, because you're not looking at, you're expecting to see one objective, one measure, one target, and this sort of thing, but it's not. That one objective relates to many things. It's a many-to-many relationship. But we were able to demonstrate how we did it. We had an internal audit program as well, so we were doing our internal audits and self-improvement systems as well. But I think the biggest, probably the other thing is there's a lot of things that we didn't start from the get-go and start from scratch, because there's a lot of stuff that a lot of people have in business that actually work, and you just need to nuance it or just reshape it or reposition it and use that, repurpose it and actually use that. There's a lot of, particularly in the health and safety area, because the port's a hazardous environment, so we were pretty good at that sort of stuff. So we leveraged off all the information that we had that was really good and useful and had been working for many years. We leveraged off that and just reference, say, this procedure or that plan, or the safety environment management plan. We've already got that, so we referenced that. So we went out of our way to streamline it as much as possible. One of the first things I did when I first was on the project was I did a mapping exercise across every requirement in all of those 4 standards, and if there was a common thread, a common element, I just take that out and park that one and crystallize it down to just a list of things that were unique to a particular standard, and then all the common elements. So by doing that, we weren't developing the same thing twice. So I only had a small team of people, but we were really focused on efficiency and effectiveness doing it that way, and it really worked. It was actually a really good project to be on. I stayed for 12 months after it just to make sure it got bedded in, and I stayed for the surveillance audit, and we did even better in the surveillance audit. There weren't any non-conformances, with just a couple of observations, I think it was, and an opportunity for improvement. So with a different auditor, a different set of eyes. So, well, actually 2 auditors. You have an auditor for the, for asset management, and then another auditor for the other 3. For some reason, because it's a JASANS system, they need to split it up. So we have a different auditor for asset management to the other 3. So, and even so, different auditors, and still come up with an excellent result. So it's definitely embedded into the business.
Thanks, Mick.
Back to you, Eric.
I think you're on mute, Eric.
We still can't hear you, Eric.
It's showing that he's offline.
Is that right? So maybe he has to come back in.
It's so strange.
I think I'm next, and so maybe while Eric is trying to solve his technical problems, I'll just start off with, I really should have paid closer attention to that agenda. I can't believe that I agreed to follow Mick Lobiaco, and the towering accomplishment in asset management that was done at the Port of Melbourne with a small staff. Well done, Mick. That the state of asset management in the United States is a different picture entirely. And we all want to be like you growing up. So I don't know if it's worse trying to follow you, or I can't, I actually got up and started working at 4 o'clock this morning, and it's dinner time in Washington, D.C. And I saw your ISO hamburger, and all I can think about is the hamburger because I'm starving. So if I get this all wrong, I'm just going to go real fast and get through my little bit here. And I'm going to pay much closer attention to who I'm following in future calls.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, we have spent some time thinking about how the ways this subcommittee can facilitate the adoption of port asset management. And one way we've been talking about is a proposal to develop a port asset management template and some case studies for typical and atypical port challenges related to a single significant asset class. To that end, I prepared an asset management plan for in-water structures using the IPWEA's template through their asset management professional certification coursework. Since MARAD's Office of Ports and Waterways is developing an asset management tool for in-water structures, this plan was developed for that class. And it's in review in somebody's hands who shall remain nameless, who can't talk now, who can't defend himself in this moment. But once it's finalized, we thought that it could form the basis for the development of a template for domestic ports and some case studies. And so we're looking for interested members of this subcommittee to participate in the development. So the task force, if you will review and comment on the plan, suggest case studies, provide real and notional data for use in developing the plan and testing it, and develop the asset management plans for each case study, all of which will bring a certain level of expertise to the participants. I've drafted a list of proposed case studies that I think would be of interest to ports, because there really is just a blank. People don't know what they look like. They don't know what they can do for them. And so the idea was we're gonna hand them the hammer, and then we're gonna show them how to use it. Right? We're gonna give them a tool and show them how to use it. So the case studies are things like cases where your available budget is much less than your forecast need, which is common for things like underwater inspections, repairs, or reconstruction. We're talking about projects that mitigate high risk, but have low revenue generating projects like demolishing derelict piers or wharves. Decreasing levels of service with no budget impact and either no revenue impact or negative revenue impact. And then finally, after incident, reshuffling of your organization's objectives after something like a Katrina event, right? Everything changes after a significant and so what does that look like? And the idea is that if we can put this together and get it out there and start socializing it, we start to break down some of the barriers in the States. And we're also looking to innovate. For example, one of the objectives of asset management planning is to institute a risk governance process that ensures risk decisions are made at the appropriate level of management. And asset management experts hold that CEOs and governing boards are the appropriate enterprise risk decision makers. And poor technical staff here, at least, do not have the tools to depict the risk consequences of an approved capital plan affecting the assets that they have stewardship over. Typically, capital portfolio decisions don't involve processes that are consistent, quantified, transparent, and repeatable. And we'd like to make some progress down that road. Another challenge of asset management planning is developing breviloquent narratives and metrics for consumption by very high-level management. Some standard asset management plan templates employ the typical probability consequence risk scoring matrices and depict the results in a tabular form. And I believe the sort of executive audience that we're aiming for and the data-intensive nature of asset management beg metrics that are that convey relationships among risk, assets, and budgets in a concise manner. And tables and narratives don't really fit that requirement. And I haven't really found part of my midnight reading is state highway transportation asset management plans. I don't see those risk metrics in state highway plans either. So I spent some time designing a series of charts that compare the risk mitigation offered by an available budget versus a forecast need, a different budget, which is typically higher. And these simple charts tie risk to assets physically on a per square foot basis of wharf deck area and to revenue through the use of cargo tonnage as a proxy. The charts convey the current state of risk and the long-term forecast of residual risk 10 years out. And the sample data that I used in that plan pitted an available budget shortfall that resulted in 25% of the total deck area of asset class remaining in a very high risk category against the forecast budget, which mitigated all of the red zone risk, right? That speaks to executives. Likewise, for the cargo, the revenue proxy, the forecast budget mitigated all the red zone risk to cargo, while the available budget left a significant fraction of the tonnage at very high risk 10 years out. So you spend all this money and your revenue is still at risk. So it's more difficult to comprehend this risk narrative than it is to grasp the nuances of the risk profiles that precipitate out of these two budget levels that come from the charts. The charts convey the results at a glance. You see it, you understand it. I'll save the rest for the task force. I'll reach out to the subcommittee shortly seeking assistance with this endeavor. If there are no questions, Eric, I'll send it back to you.
Okay, Eric has asked me to lip sync for him if you can be heard.
Good.
So start moving your lips and I'll just start talking. There we go. We're doing it. This is Eric speaking. Thanks, Patty. This is Daniel Elroy, by the way. So next we're going to move over to Alex Mora. Alex, I know we're running a little early. That doesn't happen. But are you able to speak now to the key strategic asset management components, the asset level of service determination?
Yes, I'll be brief because I'm still looking at this topic. But basically, well, first of all, good afternoon, and thank you for uh, having attended this meeting. I'm very pleased to be part of this committee also. And I'm going to
Alex,
talk
can you
about.
just do a quick intro, who you are, where you're.
Yes, oh, of course, of course. Yes, my name is Alex Mora. I am an engineer and I have done basically consulting for marine terminals, especially in the waterfront from the shoreline out to the into the sea for the past 20 years about. And most of our clients are private owners. We do not have port authorities except for Massport, who I am not really dealing with them. There is another engineer that is assigned to Massport, but I have dealt with many companies in these liquid transfer of products from vessels to the upland side. Okay, so level of service. Level of service, I consider it to be a term that describes an ideal level of quality and or the standard that must be met for a business, let's say a marine terminal, to safely operate in the course of their business. We have discussed this in the past. Strategic asset management deals with these items, and at the same time also includes a plan, a management plan that basically is like a roadmap to achieve value from these assets. And one of the things is that this accomplishes is to optimize the cost, minimizes risk, and improve performance, or as a matter of fact, maintains performance of these assets during the life cycle that is meant or designed for. Something that Mick was saying is about the service level of services required, and also the service level indicators. Level of services basically, I have heard this term before in the past as a fit for purpose, which is basically an evaluation of the existing assets through inspections, maintenance, rehabilitations, or improvements. And of course, these assets could be in the water or in the upland side. Now, we have to identify some of the service levels indicators because the business is interested in measure this service delivery that they basically are providing, and is at the same time part of the strategic asset management. The activity is fundamental to effective management of the assets and improve the operations of the terminals of the business itself, and provides basically a low risk and a safe safety of operations. Now, right now, basically, we are in the starting this topic, and it's a good time to basically request volunteers to assist with this task. I understand that Mick is interested in helping, and I'm very glad that he brings his experience to this group. And I would like to basically say that, let me see. It is basically something that I have been interested in working on for quite a long time. I have been trying to basically develop this individually with clients, and some of them are interested in applying these concepts, these asset management concepts. Others, of course, they have their own opinions, they have their own way of dealing with asset management. But again, I think what we're doing here is good for these operations. That's what I have for now.
Okay, I am lip syncing again for Eric. Yeah, I wish I could guess what you're going to say, Eric. But since we're running a little ahead of schedule, I just wanted to emphasize that wrapping our minds around fitness for service is a very important part of translating asset management from a conceptual or maybe even academic place to a practical and implementable, applicable system, because it's really sort of the difference in my mind, speaking from my own opinion, the difference between objective measures and subjective measures, right? So to perhaps the person in charge of maintaining bits of assets, it's very objective to them that this thing here is falling over and it needs to be fixed. And the idea that it is fit for something or not, that it is to them, it may be subjective. On the other hand, you could look at it in reverse, which is it is the fitness of this pile or whatever it may be to
Correct.
bring in a ship and cargo. That's actually the objective part. And the opinion that this is broken, therefore it needs to be fixed, is in fact the subjective one. It kind of turns things up on their heads. Because it's easy to look at something that's broken and go, well, it needs to be fixed, but the question is why. So, so that connection between level of service and fitness of service is very important to this, as I said, this whole discussion of going from academic to practical. That's what you were going to say, right, Eric? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, no, I could see it on your face. Okay. So I'd like to move on to the next person, and that would be Todd Neely from Neely Port Advisors and also from North-South GIS. He's splitting his time. Thank you very much. And Todd is going to address the truly moving this from the academic to the practical is how do we get ports, how do we get owners to do this? Show me the money, where's the beef, you know, all those funny expressions. So over to you, Todd.
Thank you, Daniel. Well, I think everybody on this call can probably agree that asset management is the right thing to do. Yet that will be, just because it's the right thing to do, will not hasten its implementation at ports across the United States. As we look to our brethren in the surface transportation industry, asset management is a regular and common part of their business, their everyday lives. And that's, basically from a carrot and stick perspective from the federal government. I am going to say right now, we're not going to put Patricia or Marat on the spot about this. And I was only allocated, and now I've got an echo. I was only allocated a short bit of time, so I just want to introduce this topic for further discussion. But we know that asset management was pretty much forced upon the DOT industry, really from 2012 on, when the MAP 21 codified it as a requirement for federal funding. What we would like to do is begin a really active discussion about how we can talk with not only the administrative folks and the people within the government, within USDOT and within MARAD and the other government agencies, but also elected officials about how can you begin to require asset management and provide a, not just a stick, but also a carrot for this, whether it's through having it as a criteria in grant applications. And then there are also private industry and private areas of investment from bond rating, insurance, and private lenders that can help ports ease into this and begin to adopt asset management as a more regular part of business. And so what I'm proposing is that as a follow-up to this, because as Eric said, he did try to stuff a whole bunch of stuff into this agenda. In a follow-up meeting, and between now and a follow-up meeting, we're going to issue a survey and solicit ideas for how this can be pushed throughout the United States and North America. I don't mean to exclude our Canadian friends, but how we can help industry begin to more gently adopt asset management as a standard practice. And with that, I really don't have much more to say. I would be welcome any questions or comments that anybody has. Come on, somebody.
So I wanted to make a point here. I think it's what, again, is in Eric's mind, is that, this is a COPRI ASCE sponsored committee. So we're the hands-on people, whether it's engineers or like myself, information management people. But we know that we have very little power to do what is the right thing to do unless we have that support. So whereas we're not a political action committee or anything like that, we do need to convey these messages to the people who do speak on our behalf, whether it is port management or government officials or to our professional associations, right? So as Eric said at the beginning, the infrastructure committee of AAPA is invited, and we hope some of the members, actually we know that some of the members, some of the people here are members. I've reached out to the IT committee, which I sit on as a industry associate member, right, industry member, to convey to them, because they also need to be informed and influenced. So it is important that we, because many of us have been on these calls for, at least myself for about a decade and many others for longer, this is not fun stuff. It's important stuff. So we need to, get those people to help fund this.
We do have a question apparently from Candace Moore.
Okay.
Hi, I actually work with Eric. He called in, and I can see his phone number down at the bottom, but it shows that he's muted. Does anyone know how to unmute him since he's on the phone? He doesn't have access to do it himself.
Which one's his phone number?
It starts with 9 and ends with 0.
I can remove him, but I can't unmute him.
Yeah, so that's the problem. That's why he's not able to speak, is because that mute is on.
I can try. I don't know why I would have the power to do that, but let me just try, because
we have a picture of Eric now.
Okay. Eric, are you dialing in again? Looks like you're trying.
It looks like it, yeah.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, I will continue to do my best to spiritually channel Eric here, and move the mic over to Ryan Tarbett. And Ryan is a friend from Oregon in the Hawaiian shirt. He wishes he was in Hawaii. Ryan is a formidable and walking encyclopedia of asset management concepts and practice. And I'm going to let you do the rest of the introduction yourself.
Great. Audio check. Am I coming through okay?
You're good.
All right. Excellent. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. I just have a couple of very basic slides to share. Can I get a confirm that my screen is being shared?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Excellent. Thanks, Daniel. Happy to be here. Ryan Tarbett. I'm the current chair of the U.S. delegation to ISO 55000. I've been a member of the U.S. committee for about 7 years now. And one of the things I'd just like to put out to the group here before I get started, a little sales pitch for the U.S. delegation. The ISO 55000 and 55001 standards are now currently being actively revised. If anybody on this call is interested in joining the U.S. delegation to help us look at the revision of the standard through the lens of our port industry, please feel free to contact me. Our delegation is very weak in the port space. Wonderful opportunity right now to be directly involved in the United States voice in the standard. I also work for Adkins, and I do asset management stuff of all shapes and sizes. So I've got a little bit here about socializing the idea of this committee being involved in the creation of the Port Infrastructure Report Card. So as we all know, ASCE puts together 16 report cards. The next report card is going to come out next year, as a matter of fact. The ports report card got a C+ last time around. And a big question is, and this isn't just with respect to ports, but because of our focus here, how did we get a C+? What's the rubric that was used against the specific objective information or the best subjective information we can get to arrive at this C+? How we get here? What does it mean? The actual report card is only about 2¼ pages long. And the sources for the report card are shown here. Granted, if you read through these sources, there's some very good information in them, no doubt about it. But how this information is actually pulled together to arrive at a C+ is a bit of a question mark. So this committee's involvement, so this conversation is to suggest and socialize the idea here that our subcommittee be involved in the generation of the report card. And our purpose would be to add value to the consumers of the report card. Okay, so it's a broad stakeholder group that's consuming it. And so why? How do we add value? Well, my assumption is the folks in this committee are subject matter experts in various domains. And asset management expertise is certainly a core focus of this subcommittee. And hence, that by itself would be a very strong reason for this committee's involvement in it. And we can be involved in any number of ways, directly through subject matter expertise input. Just to be able to review the report card, have an active engagement in how the C+ is arrived at, and to have a voice in that narrative could be incredibly beneficial to the various consumers of the report card. And so with that, we bring a specific lens, the asset management lens. So the report cards are broken down into 3 basic chunks: capacity and condition, funding and future need, and public safety and resilience. I'm just going to make some bold comments here. They're really more designed to create ideation amongst the team here. But a question that I put out to start that process would be, should the report card, the port report card, or all of them, have a specific subsection for asset management? Now, obviously, this is a bigger question than COPRI. The creation of the report cards is a machine unto itself. And so I fully realize that this is perhaps a bit of an academic question, but a question nonetheless. Something that has been kicked around that I've come across a lot is we don't know what the rubric is, and can that rubric be public so that any consumer of the report card actually can understand the criteria that were used to arrive at that letter grade. Without knowing what that rubric is, it's up to anybody's qualitative interpretation of what C+ actually means. There's no stake in the ground that it's relative to, a hard objective stake in the ground. So it becomes quite ambiguous. Yet the report card is used for all manner of things, from public discourse to playing a role in how to approach funding allocations to ports, and many points in between. Should the rubric use elements of ISO 55000? This is a wide-ranging question. If it did, we could begin to look at a framework around the score so that stakeholders who use it actually have a larger context within which that score can be placed. Asset management is, it's acknowledged actually in the opening statements of the standard that it's for tangible and intangible assets, but it is primarily for physical assets. So it's an axiomatic question because the report card is about port infrastructure. We have a internationally adopted ISO 55000 standard and a very large private sector apparatus that is monetizing the standard and not in a bad way. It's bringing value to ports, in the form of the work that Mick has done, in the form of work that a lot of us have done. And it's not just the port space, it's transit and transportation and power generation. There's a very big industrial machine that is growing, that can consume in a meaningful way a report card score if it had a framework around it that was connected to ISO 55000. And Daniel mentioned this a minute ago, and the gentleman from FOTH also spoke to this. There's no objective measure, for example, in the report card. So, the transportation transit space has the concept of state of good repair. Any DOT in the country can compare its state of good repair to another DOT. The federal government can look at a state of good repair across all of the DOTs and understand how our highway transportation system is faring through the lens of state of good repair. Same for transit agencies. But we don't have anything like that in the port space. So again, when we come back to the rubric of the report card, it's somewhat of a nebulous grade. So my parting comment in socializing this idea, some of these things are certainly questions that are bigger than we can get at today, but I would put to the committee that at the very least, we do bring a lens, an asset management lens, through which our collective knowledge and expertise can be applied to how the report card comes together. Maybe this next report card round, it's a relatively light touch. And then in the 2025 report card, maybe it's a bit more meaty. Who knows? But the key message here is that report card is coming in 2021 and thereafter. And as the asset management subcommittee, the idea is that we think about having a voice in the production of that report card, its actual content. So with that, Daniel, I will turn the reins.
Daniel.
Well, let me
Eric,
see. Can
Eric
you
is
guys
here.
hear me?
Yes, you're back.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, and I think that's clear evidence of the unimportance of the leader, and not just this leader, but perhaps leadership. As long as you put a good team together, which has been, I think, how I've successfully garnered what I have in my career, and you all have heard the excellent presentations so far, and so thank you for bearing with me while I fixed my little faux pas, and Ryan, that was excellent, and I think we have AAPA support on making this inquiry and trying to understand how we do move forward. As I understand, the report card right now, as it's issued by COPRI, the metrics include outside the gate infrastructure, connecting surface transportation infrastructure, as well as water side. So that, I think, is a question that we need to socialize with ASCE and AAPA. Do they really want to that encompassing sort of node in the supply chain with that connecting infrastructure, or should we just be focused on what is inside the gate and directly within the Port Authority's control? We do have, we're running a little ahead, which is wonderful. I wanted to ask if Gary Tosh is still on, and Mick, going back to what Todd was talking about, and it is acknowledged, Patty, that you are not part of this agenda item that Todd was addressing in terms of incenting development.
Yeah.
But so you're clear on that, but there is a continuum here in setting development and the infrastructure report card. I think we have time to at least touch on the certification. But Mick and Gary, outside the country, outside the U.S., incenting asset management development, can you go back to sort of the genesis of that? Mick, maybe you can start, and Gary follow up.
Yeah, sorry, could you? I'm not exactly sure what it is you're after, Eric. Again,
incenting. What were the motivations? What were the drivers? Were there public incentives? Were these strictly commercial? Understanding that you need to do more with less in terms of managing the infrastructure, the facilities at the Port of Melbourne.
Yeah, I guess when I first started at the port, I could see that. Well, it came from two areas actually. One, it's an area I was very interested in because I'd come out of a role where I was the product manager with an IT company, and we were managing strategic asset management software. Well, we were developing strategic asset management software, and I was implementing that into client sites. So obviously I was keen to do that at the Port of Melbourne because then I was the asset owner. So it was kind of inherent that way. But also the port was undergoing a major infrastructure investment program. We were deepening the shipping channels. There was about $1 billion in investment there. And there was also a third container terminal in the wings as well. And that was another $1.5 billion as well. So I could see that was going to put a lot of pressure on the balance sheet. And when I proposed the strategic asset management program and proposed it in a way that it was around doing more with less and doing things better and smarter, there was no question about jumping on board, especially when I was able to show that this is technology, these are the sort of things that you can actually do. So there weren't too many barriers. So getting a business case up was pretty straightforward. And frankly, because I brought a lot of knowledge and skills into the business anyway, it wasn't a huge financial impost to do it. I simply restructured the team. I brought in a guy who was working for me in my previous role with that IT company, and I restructured it and had a gap assessment done, put my own flavour on that, and a few other bits and pieces, and basically kicked it off from there. So I found it was fairly easy to do because I was able to demonstrate the benefits that the business would get by just investing a little bit of money. It wasn't hugely expensive actually, and then it started to become business as usual, because then we were able to embed in the business planning, the corporate planning process. We were able to put in things, because it was never in there before, things like managing. It was all about new infrastructure, but there was nothing in there about BAU, business as usual, and maintenance, and doing that better and smarter, and because that was a huge part of our cost base as well. So it wasn't that hard to get started from because I guess I brought a lot of that into it, and that was with the Port of Melbourne. And then it's about leadership, as I said before. So because I think it's really important to have a champion in the business who can drive it and has the energy that goes with it. So by doing that, I found it relatively okay. The change to the ISO certification, that was an overlay that was the government put on the business, and it was a matter of embracing that and looking for the opportunities that brought. And it's when you get into that and you start doing it and implementing, seeing what it actually does to the business, then you see the real value and the benefit. And I think when you get through the other end, but I was a bit of a naysayer at the start. When I looked at it, I thought, oh my God, all this work that we've got to do, and we're doing good asset management anyway. Does it really matter? But we had to do it because it was an obligation on the business. But it's only after you actually get in and learn it and work out what it means and what it means to the business that you realise it's actually a really good way to do it. It's actually really, really good for business, and I'm totally behind it now. But it's that that sort of change cycle, I guess. So I don't know whether that answers your question at all, Eric. But I got to say that my other point is that on leadership and having a champion in the business to run a program like this, it's really, really important, because since I went in after not long after the privatisation, I continued on my old role as General Manager of Infrastructure, but then there was some structural changes anyway. So they needed someone to do the certification program. So they threw that one at me, and I was happy to do it. But what it meant was my role behind me was changed, and it was all restructured, and different people came in and a different focus. So what we established and set up is probably not what it is now, because different people have a different focus and a different set of strengths and energy, etc., energy levels. So I look back at it now and I think they've gone back about 5 or 10 years, because they seem to have not doing so much of a strategic element anymore, but more doing back to tactical asset management. And it's a bit disappointing when I look at it, because a lot of the stuff is really, it's still there, but I think it probably, because there's a lot of new people have come on, they don't really kind of understand it. And I'm hoping that the ISO program, because what I've done with the objectives, and I had a sense that something like this might happen. So when we were establishing the objectives, I actually put in there, one of the objectives was to develop and maintain or sort of expand on the strategic asset management program. So I've tried to build in there some inherent sort of quality so that it actually is self-generating and it will continue and it will be moving forward. So because I was just a bit worried that if once I move off that project and then I'm obviously gone now, that it doesn't actually lose that momentum and traction. So I think, and a lot of people have moved on as well. So you get a new team and the new focus and things then tend to change. But I hope it does continue in a way. And I'm still doing a bit of consulting work for them anyway. So I've still got a little bit of a hand in what happens, but you don't have as much control as I had before. But that's certainly a risk.
You established a structure, and the structure is independent of the people that are carrying that process out. And so regardless of your change, the institution moves on. I think that leads us nicely, though, into a discussion of SharePoint, where we can take the best practices, in your example, Mick, and share them broadly through a vehicle that Daniel has been so kind to spend hours out of his that don't exist for him in his day-to-day. But Daniel, why don't you show us what you've been able to work up with the SharePoint, where we can talk about best practices and lessons learned.
I wish to yield the floor actually to Gary first, because last time I was up in Vancouver, I thought I heard a similar message to what Mick just said, which is that Vancouver had made really pretty decent progress in the asset management program for as many years as I've been visiting there and talking. But the last time I was there, I felt a little bit of what you just expressed, Mick, which is that some of the commitment or energy from management may have, or somewhere in the organization may have wilted a little bit. And so even a good program doesn't necessarily go on forever without fresh infusion. Gary, did you want to say anything about that?
Thanks, Daniel. Thank you. Go ahead, Gary.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Daniel. I think it's really critical. We found at the Port of Vancouver that creating a asset management directive or policy was key. Definitely not making asset management optional within the organization. We understand that asset management may be rolled out through different departments from a municipal aspect, but we found that we needed to introduce it corporate wide here. We really could not make this optional that, one department could opt out sort of thing. We really needed everybody to participate because we required information from so many different departments, whether it was our real estate department, the maintenance department, which handles obviously a lot of operational maintenance type things, day-to-day stuff. And even when new infrastructure was coming down the pipe from our infrastructure delivery group. That was really key for us. In terms of our drivers, I think, which was Eric's question, we knew from a capital accounting standpoint, we definitely knew that what we owned, we had but where was it exactly? Some of our old capital accounting from the fixed asset ledger from 1950 something, we weren't 100% sure where it was. It wasn't very descriptive. So we're big believers in integrating, as I'm sure Daniel is, integrating GIS with asset management. Where is it exactly located? And when we have partners delivering infrastructure, whether it's a regional water authority or power or sanitary or storm sewer systems, where does your responsibility for that asset end? Because well into the Port of Vancouver's jurisdiction, we know we're responsible for the vast majority of those things, unless there's a license indicating otherwise. But when you get towards the edge of those things, it's not necessarily the geopolitical border which identifies the edge of your responsibility. The Port of Vancouver years ago was highly reactive. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Sometimes we still are. Things crop up now and then that still surprise us day to day. But we really want to get away from being reactive in terms of what something's happened here. We had a dolphin start to lean or something like that. when tying up a barge or something, we wanted to know, what's the expected lifespan of some of our assets, especially our key assets. This came down, I remember we had a small dock structure which doesn't generate any income for us, but lo and behold, our C-suite used this dock structure for harbor tours. And it was a real wake-up call when we had to close that for 4 months to eventually replace that small dock structure. Although we always tend to prioritize infrastructure what provided income for us, but that was a real wake-up call that, hey, what do we, in terms of levels of service, what do we need? What provides value? Not necessarily for the engineering department or our tenants specifically, but even within our the Port Authority itself. And lastly, we have a corporate risk register, which was developed by our finance group, not our accounting group, our finance group. And this was identified asset management as a mitigator for about 12 issues. Unfortunately, I'm not actually allowed to see a lot of those. I am allowed to see the dozen, of course, that our group is responsible to mitigate. But it shows that in terms of, it shows that to corporate wide, it shows that asset management was needed to mitigate many risks. I hope that explains where we came from.
Great.
Yeah.
Gary, thank you. Yes, you guys have been at it for a good long while and moving up the maturity pyramid.
Slowly but surely.
Hey, Eric, before you move on, it looks like Dennis Lambert has tried to raise his hand.
Oh, thank you, Todd. Thank you. Dennis, please.
Yes, I just wanted to share. I'm the chair of the Waterways Committee. And Ryan brought up a good point about the rubrics of the report card. We initially, for inland waterways in 1988 was the first report card. We had a B, but ever since then we've had a D. And the reason why I bring this up is because before I was chair of the Waterways Committee, I was chair of the P3, or alternative finance for waterways infrastructure. And we worked very closely with the Corps, who did their version of what was an asset management program. And it included all their business lines, not just waterways, but it included, coastal harbors and levees, et cetera. But I'll just share this. In 2016, they were managing $268 billion in assets, and they had a $60 billion operation and maintenance backlog on those assets. So if you can imagine, if you're tracking that as an asset management system, you would know that your infrastructure is in trouble. And my understanding is that has grown to 200 billion. I don't know if the Corps agreed with that assessment, but there was a team that was put together outside of the Corps to evaluate their backlog. Their new project backlog in 2016 was 60 billion, and it grew to 100 billion today. And they did end up standing up a P3 pilot program so that they can try to knock down some of this backlog. But I just wanted to share that because I believe that when you look at the port's report card grades, they're being skewed because they're being dominated by these container ports whose assets might be in better shape than, say, an inland waterway port or the inland waterway itself, or what is the condition of the coastal harbor. In other words, some of our deepening projects haven't occurred, and there's a lot of sedimentation that has been occurring. I know down here in Louisiana, we fight that all the time. So anyway, I just had to speak up about that because I don't think that it is being captured correctly. And I do believe that an asset management program for ports, coupled with inland waterways and coastal harbors, is badly needed to really understand where we are in that sector. So anyway,
Dennis,
I just had to
thank
add
you very
that.
much.
That's why I joined this committee.
No, that's a great perspective. I know from my days of decade plus talking to senior leadership, including executive directors, deferred maintenance was, and I believe continues to be, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, or elephant, or whatever it is. But yeah, deferred maintenance is something that folks don't need to go, and I don't think is necessarily linked just to non-container ports. Container ports have huge deferred maintenance accounts as well. And that doesn't seem to me that that's indicated in the report card. So great conversation. Looking forward to following up on Ryan's work on the report card, as I think AAPA is as well. So I think we're going to have time for some roundtable discussion at the end. Daniel, you've got the time that you've allocated, and then I think we should have a few minutes after
Okay.
so that we can kind of review the bidding. Daniel, it's yours.
Okay. Also, before I start, I wanted to mention and sort of give a shout out to the other ports associations that also have a very important role to play. The North Atlantic ports, the WPPA in Washington, the Association of Pacific Ports, Florida Ports Council, Texas, all those people, because not everything that we're talking about here is ports versus ports in the federal context or the national context, but the state context, right? So I think it's important that our voices in the committee also be projected to those more hands-on committees that are, more local. Anyway, I'm going to share my screen, and one of the things that I alluded to before, and this is also kind of my reaction to Mick and Gary talking about, well, what worked for you, is that what works in Canada and Australia and other places that already are living in a kind of in an environment that's already asset management aware, asset management advanced, progressive in asset management. It's to me, it sounds incredible that in Melbourne, well, we were told to do asset management, so we're like, okay, I guess we'll do it, and it turned out to be a good thing. Whereas here, it's sort of the reverse. It's somebody, please tell us that we need to do it, otherwise it's really hard to make the case for it. What's my point? My point is that moving forward, we need to think about different approaches, improved approaches to even getting off the mark. I mean, off the start line here. I've been involved with enough ports that have tried and then stopped, and they started and it failed and they didn't go, or it kind of got sidelined with something else. We do need to do different things, or things differently. So to that end, the committee or the subcommittee, I guess we're technically a subcommittee, put together a means of communication, which is what I have here on the screen. It is a collaborative SharePoint site. As the disclaimer here in the little box says, this is a beta version of a site developed and maintained by volunteers. So in other words, you please make suggestions, but be kind with your criticisms. And for now, we don't even have a committee email to have it go to. So I just stuck my name up there, or my email address up there. And I'm happy to take suggestions, or if anybody is a bigger expert than I in SharePoint, which should be anybody, I welcome some help. But at any rate, the site, once we post the link, a little bit of a mission statement above. I borrowed just some graphic here. But what's important is on the left here, there are some very important bookmarks. But I'm going to scroll down so you see what's in here. First of all, there is how to use this site. Some of the links are, just tells you what's here and you have to scroll down to them, whereas others will actually open a larger section. What I am working on is how to use each section. And I say I'm working on it. I don't want to be the only one working on it, but since I've cracked the code on some of the things, how to add documents to the reference library, how to add to the bibliography, how to post to the calendar, all these things I'm trying to add to here. So that's number one. Number two, there is a news section here, and we'll talk about who can access all this, because you do have, at the moment, this is not wide open to the public. We are the public, but at the moment, we just don't have our heads, screwed on straight yet. So this is for the committee, which means any one of you who wants to see this, join this, contribute to this, fine, send me a request. I'll add you. I don't have a way to, tell you not to. So I'll add you. I'm not a judge of anybody's motives. So you can add news, and we put an example here of a news story that might be relevant. The next section down here is calendar for the committee, and look, we have a meeting today. Hey, we're in it. And here's the Teams link, and down below is the agenda. This is an important part, which in the old days would have been a discussion group. Now it's called a whatever it's called, a conversation. It's using a Microsoft tool called Yammer. Okay, so this is really embedding a Yammer group that we created called the COPRI AM Committee Discussion Group. By the way, I go back and forth between committee and subcommittee. I know technically we're a subcommittee, but I don't even know which committee we're a sub to. So I've been using the term committee. I can change it. I don't care. The point here is that in this Yammer group that you can also be added to, you can post a question. So I posted a question, and Todd replied, and I liked his response. I even marked it as the best answer yet. It was the only answer. But we can tag these things. In other words, I tagged it with standards. So somebody else coming here to, sorry, not here. When later on they come to search, like if they go over here and they say, oh, tell me what people are talking about, about standards, and you can guess what the word is. Standards? Did somebody do anything on standards? Standards, and it should offer it to you, and you go, oh yeah, there's been some discussion about standards. Here, you can look at the full conversation. But in addition to discussions or posing questions, you can have polls. So Eric talked about polls. You can make announcements and updates and so on. The point is, this is a Microsoft tool, so it's SharePoint. It's all Microsoft. So we're all part of the religion here. This is its own discussion thing, and what we're seeing on the SharePoint side is an update. So if somebody's yammering away over there, things will start showing up over here, and you can go, oh, what is that? That's another news feed. I realize it's another news feed. We're all overcome with news feeds. What this does not do at the moment, and you can all tell me, please don't make it send me emails. That's fine. I don't even know how to send you emails. You're going to have to come over here and take a look. If I can't figure out how to have it send you an email, I will, unless, I don't know, maybe we'll do a survey and say, please don't send us emails. Fine. Here is a very, very important part right here. And Patricia Gaynor, who spoke earlier, has done an amazing thing. She's taken a hard drive full of research and has dumped it into this reference document library. In SharePoint parlance, this is a document library, right? And you can go in here and you want to read about performance curves. You can look at the files, you can open them, you can preview them, you can download them, whatever. If you become a member of this committee, you can load things up here as well. Having said that, we all have network drives that have well-meaning people dump stuff into, and once you put enough stuff in there, nobody knows how to find anything, right? And what it means, and is it current, is it not, is it, all that. So that's one issue that we wanted to get around. The other thing is that not everything that is of referenceable importance is something we can download and then put in here. Maybe it's an evolving document that's kept by somebody else. We don't want to make a copy and then our copy is old. Maybe it's a pointer to somebody's presentation, to a website, to a video, whatever. So what we have is next to the reference library, we have a bibliography. Now, again, each one of these is just a snapshot. If you want to see the entire thing, just either click on here, or I'm going to click and say open a new tab. And this is just a sample right now. This is a running bibliography, and I'm not a trained librarian, but I put in what I thought was important. Title, description, good description, thank you. Authors, the authoring organization. What is it? Conference presentation, a standard government research, or whatever. Is it published? Is it draft? Is it whatever? Where did it come from? What's the source? What precipitated this thing? When was it published? When was this reference added here? And this is important, whether it's restricted. So we intend for this to be open to whoever. But for instance, as an example, this is the ISO standard. It's restricted in as much as you have to buy it. It's copyrighted. You can't just send it around to your friends. And so it explains what the description of the restriction is. Okay. Then it talks about the reference location. And then very importantly, the reference URL. So for instance, the ISO standard, if I clicked on here, it would just take me to the ISO store, right? And I can buy it here if I had 118 Swiss francs. I hope they take other currencies. But if you look at, for instance, one of the documents that Patricia has loaded here, so it's described in the bibliography, and when I click on here, it just goes to that reference library and it opens it up. So it's kind of an internal pointing reference to something that AECOM and some other companies did on behalf of the department of somebody. I put in one of my things. It's a presentation I gave, and it's posted on the AAPA website, and so it's a link to that PowerPoint. So that's how that works. Okay, that's a bibliography. A couple more things. Committee agendas and minutes are here. I couldn't figure out how to automatically sort it newest on top, so you just have to go and do it yourself. These are the minutes. Sorry, this is the agenda for this meeting. I don't know that anybody's collected minutes, but the recording will post up here. Fair? There are some quick links to the outside. So for instance, a link to the COPRI Asset Management Task Committee, I guess is what they're calling it, which is members like Eric, like Patricia, like, I don't know, Todd is here, someone, I'm here. So we'll ask Sean from COPRI to put the link to the SharePoint site here, because the two go hand in hand. This site is not sponsored by COPRI, we're just doing it as volunteers. I think that's about it. There's a link here to committee members. These are kind of like, I don't know, we're not founding members, we're just the ones who didn't hear right and took the step forward when the question was asked last September, who wants to volunteer. And what's important, I just on that point, I'm almost done, Eric, is as you can see, Eric, former ports, director and committee, AAPA director, and now academics. So we have all those represented here. We have Patricia, who was at the Port of Baltimore, the Maryland Ports Authority, Port of Baltimore, now is with the federal government. We have Ryan, who's industry or consulting, engineering, and as well as committee. And so we have a nice mix. We don't want any one of those constituents or stakeholders to have, an over dominant voice, except maybe the ports industry, really. I mean, the port operators, port authorities, marine terminal operators. So we do want to encourage you to join at whatever level of participation. The last couple things. What else did I want to show you? Showed you the yammer. Oh yes, there's one other thing that I didn't have time to put in here, which is something I showed to some of you in a previous meeting, is, because I run a GIS consulting firm and other IT things, I started a kind of a GIS map, on the web to start putting on the map who's doing what. and capture some of that information. And I know that a lot of it is proprietary to each port, and there's competing ports and whatever, but we're going to try and put things on the map so you can click on them. We're even going to try and gather some stories, which this was an example of. Tell us about the journey, the asset management journey that the Port of Longview went through, and sort of give a little bit of history, give a little bit of, where are they, some statistics, and then talk about the kind of how did they go from, where is it? How did they go from having their own report card to a roadmap, to putting it in the business plan, to putting it in the budget, to issuing an RFP, to then which steps did they take first? Did they collect data? Did they do GIS? Did they do a work management system, or what did they do? So there's a little bit of a story. I'm not going to show any more of that now, but those are some of the other things that I have envisioned for here. That's it for me, Eric. I appreciate what you said. I really don't have time for this, except it's a passion. So anybody who wants to contribute in some useful way, I'm happy to do it, to take it. That's it for me. Thank you.
Great work, just huge kudos. The amount of effort that went into that is massive. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Looks terrific.
Eric, what you got? Oh no, we can't hear you. Come on, you can do it. Take us across the line. I can't mimic you. Nope. Okay. No. Eric, dial in again if you can on the phone. Nope. All right. Any of the other committee members? Patty, I don't want to channel Eric strictly. Does any other one of the committee members want to bring us to a close, especially as far as next steps? Any burning deadlines or opportunities that are coming up?
I think that that was actually where Eric wanted to go next, was sort of next steps and setting up. He had talked about quarterly meetings in the future and trying to get these various task groups organized and moving forward on. Well, actually, I think a lot of us have to put together an agenda and then move forward on the agenda. But the details of that, I'm not really sure how he was planning to do that.
Right. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
We
Oh,
sure
yes,
can.
yes.
Of course.
We're so glad you're here.
I'm Swedish. I don't know what's going on. This is a roundtable, so I'm really not important in this section. We need to hear from the folks that have been bearing with us. We've got expertise. I'm really pleased, Daniel. Thank you so much for doing that. Awesome. And I agree with you totally that this committee will succeed to the extent that we have owners, as well as consultants, as well as government folks, and even throw in an academic or two or three. So, please, who's up? Who's got a raised hand? Who wants to speak? Please weigh in on where this committee should be going, next steps, any questions for Mick or anybody else that presented.
Can I just add, don't say that I think the Port of Melbourne I put the first asset management policy in place back in 2005, and we were doing good asset management, but it's kind of subjective. I mean, but the point I was trying to make before is that when people change roles and there's restructures and people, you still got a commitment to asset management and they're still doing good asset management. But what does that actually look like? It's subjective. It's about the person, because if the person who's leading it moves on and someone else goes in there, their perception of asset management is then what takes over and then goes along with that. So it's still there, and there's now a certified program. So I think it's important from a longevity point of view to embed the commitment to asset management into the policy setting, and also what I did was I embedded it into the asset management objectives. So there's a clear objective to the asset management system, that there's a commitment to strategic asset management. That's fine, but the person that's then driving that, the people that are driving that, what's their perception of strategic asset management? And that, I think, it's a good point, because that is the bit that's kind of missing, because what's the it means different things to different people in terms of what's strategic asset management. And this is the conundrum, and this, I think, what we as a group, the sort of thing we're going to come up against, because it's a little bit personalised. It's subjective. It's what it means to the individual. There's a lot of documentation around there around benchmarks. I mean, there's the International Infrastructure Management Manual, there's the Optimisation Manual, all those things. But what does it actually mean, and what does it actually mean for that business is another thing. So it's I'm really interested in being able to do, and I think ISO takes it somewhere down the path to getting to a resolution. But I think I'm interested in trying to define what that actually looks like, and set, maybe it's the benchmark card, report card. Maybe it's along those lines, and to have some standards in there in terms of what you need, what's the threshold level to say you're achieved that in the maturity pyramid, you actually get to that next level of maturity. So it doesn't mean you're not doing it. You'd have the policy setting, you still have your objectives, but it's almost back to who's running the business, who's leading that program at the time, because it means different things to different people, and it's just the way it is. And I think that's an area that can be and should be improved. And I'm happy to take a lead role, not a lead role, but I'm happy to take do some more work in that area.
Thanks, Nick. And it's not only the different people, it's the different times. What you have, the processes that you're using to achieve your asset management goals 10 years ago may not be applicable currently. And you have your hand up. Please let us know what's on your mind.
Sure. So I work with the Port of Seattle, and I've been there 25 years, and I'm very interested in asset management, but it's not really a core part of my work, but I just have a passion around it. And I would really love to see the levels of maturity defined. You know, what are those plateaus? Yeah. I'm not familiar with ISO 55000, but I'd like to learn more. So that's one area that I'm interested in. And from an owner's perspective, we do not have policies around strategic asset management. But I would see that as one of those plateaus in terms of levels of maturity. What incentivizes asset management for our executives is really that we're providing data to drive decision making. We're showing that we can repair for much lower costs than replacing, and we're being proactive. So we're avoiding surprises down the road. So those are the kinds of things that sell asset management to owners. And it is so variable across the different ports because of the different types of business. The assets are going to be quite different for containerized cargo, bulk cargo, cruise terminals, commercial fishing, grain, wreck boating. So the variety of businesses will determine, what is their ability to spend money on tracking conditions and doing the asset management tasks that need to be done. We're at a point, and I shared this with Eric when we talked last, we have about a dozen different asset condition tracking programs, but we don't really have a central place for it. We don't really have a policy that drives it. I'm currently talking with all of our maritime directors about how we can more institutionalize asset management by hiring an FTE. Just have one person who that is their job, that they take these dozen or so programs and they run them. They make sure that they're following standards, that their reporting is consistent, their recommendations are what the business sponsors are looking for. So that's our next step. That's our next level of maturity. I just wanted to share that. And I have one question that Ports 21, are we expecting papers on asset management? And what are we looking for? I think that's one thing this subcommittee can do.
That's a good question, Ann, and I don't have an answer to it, but I know that that's something that COPRI would be keenly interested in us defining, and thanks for reminding me. I will put that in our survey that goes out, and we can socialize that on the SharePoint site.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thank
Ryan?
you.
Ryan, you
Ryan,
had
you had
your
a
hand
comment?
up, but it is also
Yeah,
up
we're
to the top of the hour.
yeah, we're at time. So I do want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I'll
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay. I'll just say that with respect to continuity of the program, that's something I run into all the time as well. And one of the things that I've seen that really helps make that stick is when a significant part of the asset management function is located with audit and control within the organization, and perhaps not necessarily so much with the engineering functions. You think about it, especially with the consultants on the phone, every time you go travel, you got accounting breathing down your neck for those receipts, and they want that receipt down to the $5. And there's a system, right? And it's the same system, but the value context of the port is going to change, right? Bigger ships come, channels get dredged, and so the context of how you want to deal with your assets might change. And so I think, Mick, I'd love to work with you on that. I think that would be really helpful. One last thing, I know I had 2 minutes. How do I share? Yeah, here we go. I just want to throw up to the group in terms of maturity assessment. Some of you will be familiar with this and some of you won't. There's an organization called the Institute for Asset Management. They put out a whole laundry list of subject-specific guidelines. This is the maturity assessment. And it defines what maturity is. There are 39 areas against which you are assessed, and they go into a fair bit of detail on each one. And they tell you, clearly define what the maturity levels are and what they mean. And the real sort of powerful thing is you get a nice detailed outcome. Shows you where you're strong, where you're weak, where you can improve. But what you're looking for from an ISO perspective is what we call a competence level. So nobody's looking for excellence. It's really just looking for competence. But I just wanted to throw this up just for the group, maybe for future discussions. There's all financial planning, optimization, how to deal with risk, capacity and demand planning, all you name it. There's a laundry list of these subject-specific guidelines, and they're quite good. Anyway, I just wanted to leave the group with that.
That's great, Ryan. Thank you so much for bringing up the IAM. Daniel, could you remind us as we exit? Is the SharePoint site alive now, or what's
it is?
What's
it
that?
is. We will have to send the link out, but anybody who gets the link will be prompted to, I believe, the first one who tries it will let me know. They will ask me to add them in. You'll be prompted to log in with your Office 365 login. So most people have that. Doesn't have to be your SharePoint, but if you have like O365 Office, that should be the login that you will use, and it will ask me to add you. I'll add you as a member. As a member, hopefully you can't just annihilate the site by accident, but you can do other things. You can contribute. You can do whatever. And don't be afraid. If you put something there and it shouldn't be there, and you ask me to take it off, hopefully I know how. Let's just be kind.
Thank you, Daniel. Well, thank you all. And if there's no concluding thoughts, I very much appreciate all of your participation. We have a lot to keep the ball rolling to achieve. This has been wonderful. Mick, thanks so much for getting up early and joining us and sharing your thoughts. Thanks again to Patty and Ryan and Daniel and Todd and Alex for contributing, and for you all for contributing. And we look to be in touch soon.
Yep, and for COPRI's sponsorship. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
The sun's coming in now. We've got daylight.
Okay, good.
Stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good
All
night.
right. Thank you. Be safe. Bye-bye. All right, that was good. Why? The case is right. I know. I feel it. Okay. Well, that was good. That was good. Oh man, that was really frustrating. It kept kicking me off. It kept muting me, and then I have to